Welcome to Yelling into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm Tevin. I'm joined today, as always, by my fellow degenerate, Scott. Scott, I streamed a few times over this past week, and I just want to know, how many 80s do you currently have? Because that was a question I was asked on the stream.
I have 5.
5?
I have 5. Yep.
Well, unfortunately, I have you beat at 6. I don't want to say that, but I do. But how do you feel about they're nerfing the leveling in dungeons tomorrow? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean they're nerfing it a little bit. Like they're basically what they're just doing is making it so being level 70 to 73-ish is not quite as ridiculous and absurd as it was over the early access weekend. And I mean, I think it needs to be done. It is pretty absurd. I think one weird thing after leveling 5 characters almost exclusively through dungeons after the first one is it feels very weird to be clearly weaker each level. Like you just
Mm.
feel like you're getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and the pulls you could do, you could tank at level 71 easily without even having to do any of your active mitigation at 79 is just like killing you. And that's just like it's a weird thing to feel. Like you should be feeling like your character is advancing, getting more powerful as it gets access to more of these hero talents, and it's the exact opposite of that.
So, I guess the follow-up question to that is, are you planning on doing any more leveling before tomorrow?
Probably not. I mean, I leveled 5 of the 6 tanks. Demon Hunter is the only tank I have not leveled yet, and frankly, it's the only tank I just have no idea how to play. This is like the one time I've boosted a character. I used the boost that we got with the War Within to boost a Demon Hunter to 70, and so I've never played it ever. I don't know how to play it. I don't understand any of it. So it's gonna be a little while before I get on and level that one the rest of the way up.
For me, I need to stop leveling characters because they've done a pretty damn good job with class design this expansion. And every time I get on a new character, it's like, wow, this is actually really fun. Do I want to play this as my main? Uh, yeah, I kind of need to stop.
Yeah, we
Uh,
all saw this coming, Tevin. No one is surprised at all.
Either way, the War Within is now fully out. Everybody has access to it. I do think that we are going to talk a little bit about. Actually, let's just jump into it. Early access. Initially, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I guess like we'll get into the leveling stuff a little bit later, but I have felt weird about early access as a thing since it was announced, right? I think the people who say it's a little gross and predatory, I think have a point. Obviously was not gross and predatory enough for me to not partake in it, and I feel like they're going to do this from now on, and I'm going to partake in it from now on because like I just don't have as much time with this game, and anything that gives me a little bit more time with the game I'm going to take advantage of. But I don't know. I think there was like a meme that sprung up over the weekend of like the pores, like, oh no, the pores are coming soon. And like it's funny. It's really funny. But also it's like it's just part of why this whole thing felt really icky to me.
Yeah.
That I just like look, I leveled 5 characters over the weekend, and part of that is because they've made the leveling process incredibly quick. But also like I am 10 steps ahead of where I would have been if I had not paid an additional $40. So like is do I get a competitive advantage? Kind of. I mean, one that's going to even out very quickly. Like I feel like by the second month of this expansion, you will not be able to tell who had early access and who didn't. You just won't. Probably even quicker than that. Probably by like the third week, you won't be able to tell. But like I definitely feel right this minute that I have a leg up on other people. That I've already leveled not only my main, but all these other classes that I was planning on leveling up over the course of the next 2 weeks, and I just immediately realized I didn't have to do that. So like it's very hard for me to buy the argument that this really doesn't give you a leg up on people. So
I think the most evident of this, and we have talked about this in a previous podcast, but is the crafting and gathering. Like having rank 100 and having skill points unlocked and patterns unlocked that people can't even get to until later
Yeah.
is like that's massive. I mean, being able to day one craft something for people who are just joining the game now, that's huge.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
that is kind of the area where I take issue with this the most. The other part that I kind of take issue with this is they said that this isn't really going to give you an advantage, and albeit they've increased the item level for heroics, so the bountiful delve stuff that we've talked about in the past isn't as big of a deal, but we have access to an additional key that people who didn't get max level and then get the key the first day don't have.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a problem too.
It is, but it's not. I mean, I think the keys are going to ultimately matter way less than we thought. But I think for your average player, I think it will matter quite a big deal. And like beyond the actual like rational empirical truth of how much advantage you have or don't have, the greatest point against this is it feels like if you didn't do this, you're behind. Like, even if it's
Mhm.
objectively not true, it's what it feels like. When you log in on launch day and everyone else is level 80, it feels like you're starting the game a step behind. And
Mhm.
that is not a good feeling. And that matters in the mind of a player more than any kind of actual empirical evidence on how far ahead they are and how long they'll maintain this competitive advantage, yada, yada, yada. It just feels like it. Especially, they were doing a thing. Blizzard was releasing YouTube videos of some of the cutscenes that play while leveling up on YouTube this weekend.
Yeah, that was kinda messed up.
And so even if there were no spoilers in the title of the cutscene or in the image on the thumbnail, so you would only actually be spoiled on the story if you clicked on it, but it's all part of this feeling that, oh, the game's actually out already. This feeling that this was not 4 days early, this was everyone who didn't do this gets to play 4 days late. And
Well, the other thing that I have a problem with, the like, exact thing you're saying is in trade chat. Trade chat's the same between people who have early access and who don't,
yeah.
and there's something very significant that happens at the beginning of the story, and that's just getting spammed in trade chat all over the
Yeah,
place.
it became a
And
Snape kills Dumbledore meme, where people were
yeah.
just finding it funny to spam that thing. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't like it. I don't like early access as like a benefit of any kind of like. I don't even love it as a pre-order bonus because I just think segmenting your population I don't like in these online consistent games. It's gonna happen. I think like Blizzard, I'm sure is looking at the general disappointing sentiment while also looking at the numbers that said, who knows, a vast majority of people, I think, uh, spent the extra $40 and paid for this. So like you can't, as a company that exists in the world, you can't turn that money down. You can't be like you can't go to your board and your shareholders and be like, oh yeah, this was hugely successful. We're not going to do it anymore though because some people got mad. Like they'll be like, "What are you an idiot?" No, of course. So if they're going to do it from now on, this is going to be the standard operating procedure from every expansion from now until the end of the game, like for sure.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because like you said, I will probably be buying into this most of the time.
I
Not
acknowledge that
only
I am part of the problem here is that
yeah,
that
same.
I am, but I'm going to do it. So sorry.
Yeah. And not only just from like a perspective of like using it for, content creation and knowledge, but also just the sheer fact of like I enjoy the game enough that I want to do that and have the means to do it, which is not good. Like it's not a good position to be
Yeah,
in, right?
yeah,
Cuz like if I enjoyed the game the same amount that I do now, but I didn't have the means to do that, then I would like you were saying earlier, I would be not happy about this at
yeah,
all.
yeah. Yeah, I completely
So,
understand why people that either couldn't or didn't want to partake in this are very annoyed and angry right now. Completely get it. Um, wish we didn't do it this way, but that's where we are now.
mhm. I do think that it doesn't bode well for the MMO genre as a whole that Final Fantasy is also doing this. Now, granted, you don't have to pay extra money for Final Fantasy's early access. It's just a pre-order bonus
Yeah.
of the expansion. But if the two giants are doing this, it's just going to become
Yep.
commonplace for the genre
For
as a
sure.
whole.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, especially me, who I have never bought. In the years and years I've played this game over the course of the last 20 years, I've never bought the Epic Edition or whatever the hell it's called. I've never gone for that one. I just didn't see the point. I was like, I don't really need the cosmetic things, and it's whatever. I've always just done the base edition, and this is the first time I did. Why is that? Specifically because they added this. Um, so yeah, they got me. They know, and it's working for sure.
I will say the other part of the Epic Edition that I want them to remove, I want this removed. I don't think beta access should be tied to the Epic Edition of the game. I think beta access should be tied to, people who are going to provide feedback and stuff like that.
Well, yeah,
That
but then
is
I
the one
probably
thing that
wouldn't
I'm a
have
little
gotten
worried
in,
about.
so I don't like that.
I mean, same, but also I want people to make the game better, not just play the game early because they think it's just an early time to play the game.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Anyways,
I think the biggest thing, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a bit, but like the biggest thing about this that's such a bummer is it puts this bad taste on what is, in my opinion, an incredible expansion and an incredible launch. Like
yeah.
both just the content that is here in the game right now is excellent, and one of the smoothest launches of a game of this type I've ever seen. They did and perhaps that's literally just because they segmented the player base into the haves and have nots, and so they got to kind of load balance that way. But everything worked super well all weekend, and even there were a little bit of hiccups on Monday. I understand I didn't get to play on Monday evening, but incredibly smooth.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the main thing that I want to talk about during this podcast, so is like how well actually this has been going.
Yeah.
And how good in my opinion the expansion is. I mean, I've already talked about it a little bit. Like class design, I've leveled 6 classes to 80 now, and they all feel the best they've ever felt to me. Now I haven't played every spec, right? And I haven't played there's things that feel bad like Rogue and Demon Hunter and stuff like that. But of the ones I've played, I mean, it feels pretty damn good. So that's there's a lot of positives coming out of here.
Yeah.
Um, and we typically talk pretty highly of this game, and I think that that might get conflated with the fact that this actually is, in my opinion, just a generally good launch. So I do want to have that little caveat. You and I do typically talk fairly highly of this game and want it to get better. And that's why we point out the things that we have an issue with. It's not just to drone on the problems and be, you know, the popular thing is to hate World of Warcraft and Blizzard right now.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I don't know if there's anything else that you want to really touch on before we jump in here.
No,
I've got a few audience call outs though.
yeah, no, nothing to say until we get into the content of the expansion itself. But I completely agree. Really, really good game. The War Within. Like I think we talked about how it felt like the hype was a little muted. I think there was a lot of like rumblings and nervousness about like, there's not like really major new systems. Yeah, like how is this gonna work? And like this is a great game right now. And I mean, the amazing part is we haven't even gotten into the parts of the game that I love that I want to do. Like we haven't gotten to raids, we haven't gotten to Mythic Plus yet, and yet I'm loving everything that's going on here. So it's very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So to start off the like main segment of the podcast, I've got a few audience call outs. I want to do this a little bit earlier this time because I'm not sure we'll have time to get to it later, to be honest with
Sure.
you. So we've actually had a couple of people reach out interested in joining the guild. And for that, I greatly appreciate you guys. On the comments of the last YouTube video, there's actually a link to a form to fill out for the guild. So if you are interested in applying, go for it. So we'll get back to you guys. I promise. Eventually, there's a lot going on right now, so sorry it's taking us a little bit of time, but yeah,
It's all part of our long con to make a podcast just to get people for the guild. It's working. It's working perfectly.
yeah, yeah. That was the whole intent. um, but there's two other comments that I wanted to call out. One of them because it's kind of comical. So there was a user on our last video. It looks like, and I'm gonna potentially butcher the name. Polizand said, "Not being yapping into the void seems like a missed opportunity, but keep it up, guys." And we went back and forth for a while on the name for the podcast. And at one point, I put this in the response to his comment, but at one point we were talking about the name being going verbal, and it was around the time that all of the nonverbal memes were going on.
I think we were
And
worried that wouldn't have staying power, and a year from now, people would just have no idea what the fuck we're talking about.
exactly. But either way, I thought that one was pretty comical.
I like yapping into
Uh,
the void. I have a question for you. It's like,
yeah.
is yapping like? I feel like I see people use the word yap a lot more lately. Is that like a thing now? Is that like a new internet phrase we're all using?
I think so. I think between the Gen Alphas
Ugh,
coming in and saying it a lot, and
my God.
also Max's stream, I think has popularized yapping a lot. There, which is funny because it's normally as a negative against Max, not a positive against
That's what you do,
Max.
man. You take your criticisms and you consume them until they become you, and then people can't hurt you with them anymore.
But yeah, I do think it's here to stay, at least for now.
Well, good. I'm glad. I'm very glad.
But the next comment here is from the Hointa 7945. Dragonflight talents, gearing, professions, profession trees, systems were all pretty top notch. However, they did like the raids and Mythic Plus better in Shadowlands. Which is wild to me because I had a lot of fun in the stuff in Dragonflight. But I can definitely see where they're coming from. We did lose seasonals in Dragonflight, which is a pretty big hit to a lot of people's enjoyment of Mythic Plus.
Yeah, this one was in response to our discussion question last week, right? On
Yeah,
what you think overall of Dragonflight as we say bye bye to it. I think I agree with this comment. I mean, and maybe like the problem with it is like as I've said multiple times, I came back to the game during Shadowlands, so like I have a little of like the new car smell factor that's happening here. Where it's been so long since I was in the game, I was like, oh, these dungeons are so cool because I've never experienced dungeons like this in the game, and I've never experienced raids like this in the game, and it's all kind of new and fresh for me. So it feels that way. I mean, I generally agree that like every bit of the systems in the game were 20 times better in Dragonflight. But yeah, no, there's some good raids. I really liked Sepulcher. I know that's maybe that's not controversial, but I really enjoyed Sepulcher of the first ones a lot.
as long as you don't say you liked Sanctum, we're fine.
I
I don't
mean,
think anybody worked over
I did
that.
Sanctum exactly one time, and it was when it was a faded raid, and that was it. That was it.
um, but I do have one thing that I want to talk about. It leads us into a bit of the War Within stuff. The systems and professions and everything in Dragonflight were massively overhauled. And they continued to overhaul them a little bit more into the War Within, to the point where I think professions might be becoming a little bit annoying. Uh, the thing that comes to mind immediately to me is you can no longer just get cloth drops. You have to be a tailor to get cloth drops from mobs.
Yeah.
And like you might be able to get a little bit of cloth, but like to actually get enough cloth to like sell or to use, you have to be a tailor, which like I guess kind of makes sense, but that's not how the game's been at all up until this point.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely bucks 20 years of established norms in the game that cloth was just a thing that dropped for everyone. I would assume, and I haven't looked into this. I hope this is the case, but they are by doing this reducing the overall amount of cloth that will exist in the world. So I would hope that the recipes in the War Within have been also subsequently reduced in the amount of cloth necessary to make things, because like it took a lot of cloth in this game to make stuff in previous expansions. But that was generally okay because it was also one of the easiest things to farm because everyone got it. It dropped from every mob, every humanoid mob basically dropped cloth, and there was just a shit ton of it around. So when you've turned it into any other gathering profession where it can only drop if you have that profession, um, that changes things, and you should reduce the amount needed. It makes it much more in line with the other professions. So hopefully they did that. Um,
Hmm.
man, here's the thing. I don't have patience for professions in this game. Like when it was the classic system, when it was pretty easy, that's fine. But like the second it gets complicated, I thought the Dragonflight one was too complicated for my tastes. Now, don't get me wrong, I think it's absolutely fine if people find these things fun. And for people that like to play the profession game, I wish for them that it is the most complicated possible systems to get their enjoyment out of it. But for me, I don't care. And so I am leveling alchemy up just enough to get the your vials and flasks will last longer benefit. And then I am done with professions in this game. That is exactly it. That's all I'm doing.
Have you done any gathering yet?
No. Uh-uh.
Dude, some of the gathering nodes, specifically for mining, are like the most frustrating thing ever. There's like these nodes that are like loaded with TNT and they just like shit out TNT while you're mining. And you have to like sometimes just stop mining and move and then go back to mining again, which like thankfully it saves your progress. It doesn't make you restart the whole mine over again. But like, man, it's annoying.
I feel like gathering does not need to be a mini game. Like the reason why people that do gathering like gathering is it's because it's a kind of watch TV brain off thing. Like I'm going to be honest with you, in Cata Classic, I gathered mining nodes while recording a podcast because I needed a shit ton of ore in Cata Classic when we were doing that, and I was recording a podcast. I was talking to my friend, and I knew I could just focus totally on the conversation with minimal amount of brain power on gathering. So that kind of stuff feels like they're trying to gamify gathering a little bit too much. And I
Yeah.
did a little bit of gathering in Dragonflight, and like I think there was some of that. Like there was the special nodes that do different things. Like the tornado one that would send you flying.
Hmm.
It feels like I don't know. That doesn't feel necessary to me. I don't think gathering needs to be fun. I think it's just a chore. Like it's literally just a chore that you have to do. And I think that's probably okay.
Yeah, and I mean, if they want to make it more fun or interactive or whatever, I do think that there's better ways to do it than making you have to stop mining the thing you want to mine and then go mine it
Yeah,
again.
or
That
die.
doesn't. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so all of that aside, I want to jump into kind of the main thing that we're here to talk about in just the war within in general, and kind of the experiences that we had leveling and experiencing the zones, the story, the cutscenes
Yeah.
for the first time. We will do our best to be spoiler free. I'm going to try and maintain that throughout the entirety of this discussion. So please stop me if I start saying something that is a spoiler.
Okay.
But I think the first thing to note is something that you and I have already talked about in kind of the pre patch quests and cutscenes that they have, in that um, the fact that they are going through and the cutscenes are so high quality right now, you can get emotion and feeling from characters like facial expressions like it's a normal like human interaction rather than the character is just like I'm so mad right now rah.
Hmm.
And I think that that is huge. Like I was talking with another one of our guildies today, and like all of the stuff, and this is pre-patch stuff, so I think this is relatively safe to talk about, but all of the stuff with Illyria and like why she doesn't want to do all of the void stuff and how she's worried that that's going to make her kill her family and all of that stuff isn't explicitly said, but
Yeah.
you can tell by the interaction with her and Khadgar and how Khadgar responds to that.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I think that that storytelling has gotten significantly better, which is hilarious because we dogged on WoW storytelling not but like a month ago.
Yeah. So I want to. I want to clarify some stuff we said on that podcast and on other episodes about kind of this storytelling, questing, open world part of World of Warcraft. We we're been pretty negative on it overall. Like, I think the specific thing I said is, if this is all you play the game for, I don't understand you. What I need to kind of clarify on that is, I actually generally like this stuff. I just don't think it sustains the game over an extended amount of time. But this early expansion, getting into a zone, exploring it, the side quest telling you little bits and pieces of story in the zone, like the design and like the little mini puzzle things they've added, where sometimes, like, I think in Hollowfall, like, I just found this wolf and he was just a sleeping wolf, and it's like, hey, he's probably hungry, and then you find a guy who's selling like a big hunk of meat, and you just give the meat to the wolf, and it's like this little mini puzzle. um I think all these things are really, really fun. I do, and they've been fun in every zone I played them in, uh since I've come back to the game. I just don't think they sustain the game for me in a long-term way, like the actual Mythic Plus system does. So I think I just wanted to say that to clarify that, like, I think this stuff is generally pretty good in this game, and I think overall my experience with it this weekend in the War Within was like A plus, where I was having just a really good time. And I don't want to dog on Final Fantasy 14 again, because I feel like we do that a lot, and it's like, I think that's a very good game that is just not for me. It's just not my speed at all. But like, I found the leveling experience in this game just refreshing and fun, and it's part of it's the story and what you're talking about. The cutscenes are doing a really good job of conveying the emotions of the story. Part of it's the zones and the design of the zones, and just the overarching like feel of the places that we're visiting, and those little mini stories in them. Like, I just think all of it is incredibly well done in this game, in this
Hmm.
expansion. Like, every bit of it I thought was pretty good. If I had to critique the story, I would say it feels like it's over very quickly. This is a very fast leveling process, like, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the leveling process being fast, but it does feel like, because we're moving things so fast, some of the story beats go a little too quick for me. It's like, oh, we're done with that. Like, there's a character you meet in Hollowfall. Again, I'm trying to be vague here. And like, you meet, and there's a lot of interaction with her via quests, and then you get to the end of the zone and you move on, and I think she says something to the effect of like calling you a good friend. And like, in game playtime, I met her like 15 minutes ago. like you just move through it very, very quickly, and that feels a little weird. And obviously the story, like, we get to the end of the story campaign, and it's not over. We barely scratched the surface of the story of the expansion. So there is this little feeling of like, okay, that's done, but nothing, like, we don't have any answers to any of the questions that were asked at the beginning of the story. So but that's a small complaint. Overall, I think my experience with each and every one of these zones was awe and wonder and fun. I had a big smile on my face the whole time. Like, it was great. It was
Hmm.
great.
So the one thing that I did want to say as far as story that was weird to me, is they did a little bit of a different approach with the whole like introductory story in
Hmm.
this expansion, to where you finished the entirety of the leveling campaign before you like establish the horde or the alliance in the main city,
Yeah, that was
which is odd.
yeah. The No spoilers, but the first quest of the max level story that came out on Monday is the Horde and Alliance arriving at Kazalgar. And I did have the thought as I was watching that scene play out. I was like, isn't this normally like the moment
First thing.
it's like the first thing that happens in the expansion? It's,
Yeah.
oh, the Horde and Alliance are here now. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, that is the one thing from the story that I felt was really just odd,
I kind
but
of
I
like
guess
it
we'll see how
though.
it
I
goes.
kind of like it.
Yeah.
Like, I think it changes things up enough to where, like, the focus of the story is it kind of a very intimate thing where you're dealing with just a few characters. Like, Thrall and Jaina heavy in the marketing, but not really heavy in the level up story because they've gone to get the Horde and the Alliance. So you have characters like Illyria, you have characters like Anduin, and then some of the characters that I don't want to talk about yet. But like it ends up being like a very intimate, character driven, how these characters are pinging off each other, what they're learning from each other, how their struggles and are relating to each other and complicating each other. And like I think not having the larger Horde Alliance thing behind it, I think allows that stuff to really exist on its own terms. And I think that ultimately strengthens the story.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I guess as far as cutscenes go, we've kind of talked about it a little bit. But I think the cutscenes in The War Within have been very well done.
Hmm.
Uh like almost like they're trailer level cutscenes that they would do in like a gameplay trailer. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what they did to step up the cutscenes from Dragonflight to The War Within, but I'm here for it, and I would love to see them keep going in this way. I mean, like, any of your interactions with any of the characters or any of the bad guys in a cutscene, like, it just I don't know, it feels more epic now than it is just, like, a character in a game engine where they're limited by everything that they're doing. Like, these seem like they're just, like, handcrafted cutscenes.
Yeah, they're very, very good. I mean, I think you're right that they did something fidelity wise to make them look better. I also just think like the cutscenes work on you better when you're invested in the story. And I think one thing they've done a very good job of is getting us invested in the story. I think Xalatath is a fun villain who you love to hate. And then you have everything that's going on with the Nerubians, and like it's working on you because they've put the effort into making you care. And I think that's a big testament to it. I will say this is a quibble, but the the trailer, the announcement trailer, are always like incredibly high fidelity, like amazing photorealistic animation, look beautiful. And it is like this worked when the game was essentially like we spend all this money to make one incredible looking trailer, and then basically the rest of the game just plays out in game without any cutscenes. And so like the disconnect between the two looks of the game there worked fine on me. But now we have this incredible photorealistic trailer with Anduin just looking awesome. And then we also have a still really good, but obviously like lower res version of the in-game cutscenes that play of Anduin. And I just feel like that we live in three different versions where we have in-game Anduin that we see running around and fighting stuff with us. Then we have cutscene Anduin that we see looks a little bit different from that. And then also we have trailer Anduin who looks like an actual human being. And the my brain is always kind of like, ugh, I can't, I can't these are these the same people? I want that version of him. Why can't you do that version? So I don't know. It's not a real problem at all, but just something I felt while playing the game.
Question for you on the Anduin front. I was talking to another one of our guild members today, and they said that all of the characters look so hot and look so good, and then Anduin looks like he got ran over by a truck in the load screen. So,
Yeah, but that's
what do
that's
you think there?
that's what's happening to him right now, though. Like that's what's
But
going on.
the argument was he looked good in the trailer.
Did I mean he looked good in that I thought the
He looks
animation.
rough,
I think he looks like
but
shit. I think he like like I think someone would walk up to Anduin at the water cooler and be like, "Hey, didn't get a lot of sleep last night, huh?" So I think that works. I think it works with what he's going through.
yeah, I thought it was just a funny aside.
Hmm.
Um, the next big thing to talk about is the zones, and man, oh man, the zones. All of them are absolutely massive, and I don't know if you know this or not, Scott. We are underground for 75% of this game.
No way.
I If you look up, you can't tell.
Yeah.
If you go into Hollowfall, there is a coastline, and you can stand on the coastline and look up, and you see the crystal in the sky. There is a skybox, not a ceiling, a skybox, and there is water as far as you can see out.
Yeah.
It does not feel like you are underground.
And the game doesn't let you fly out there, by the way. You get too close to the crystal, and then it turns like dazzlingly white, and then you end up passed out on the beach. It doesn't let you go there. I tried. Yeah, I mean, I think all the zones are very, very good. I think the Isle of Dorn, like our introductory zone, I was surprised at how much I liked that one. I kind of felt going into it that like this is going to be like the starter zone that I'm going to be like, okay, I want to go underground. I want to go underground. Let's go. But I ended up really liking that zone. I think that the earthen architecture is really cool. I like the different areas, but unfortunately for every other zone in this expansion, Hollowfall exists,
Yep.
which is objectively the most beautiful zone that they've ever made in this game, like ever. Like, and like just the perfect design is the moment where you go flying through the entrance from the ring deeps, and like they designed it this way. They like it's a picture. You just go through that doorway, and you like rise up, and just like bam, the crystal and the world behind it, and just like everything. It's just a moment. I've done that like multiple times now over the course of the weekend, where I've flown from Dornogal through the ring deeps right into Hollowfall, and every time you get that moment where you first enter the zone, you move through that doorway, you see the crystal in the background, the giant castle, the music switches to the Hollowfall music and just swells, and the like I really feel like the camera does this thing where it kind of like, I don't know what it's doing, but it almost like it something is happening in the camera of the game in that moment where it's like, look at it. And it's incredible.
It
Incredible.
The first time I went in there, it gave me have you played the first Nintendo Switch Zelda game?
uh like, which one's that? Twilight
Uh
Princess?
no. I can't for the life of me remember the name of it.
Oh,
I'll
Breath
have
of
to
the
look it
Wild.
up.
Breath of the Wild. Yeah,
Breath
yeah.
of the Wild. Yeah, yeah, Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Uh when you come out of the like first area and you walk up the hill, and then you like the camera zooms out of Link and over the entire zone, like that's the vibe that I got going into Hollowfall.
Yeah. But no offense to Breath of the Wild, it looks like dog shit compared to this. That's just like, and the thing is, like, obviously the game doesn't particularly look like that significantly better than like the game's 20 years old, right? Let's not kid ourselves. But it's all like clever uses of lighting and structure and like clouds and the skybox. Like, it's all just very clever. The developers of this game are very, very good at like hiding their technical limitations in this stuff, and
Mhm.
zone looks gorgeous. And I think one of the cool things about the zone is it's not just this scenery. It's like, I love the story of the zone. I love the atmosphere, the mood. I love all of it. Like, man, that crystal turning purple. I guess that's a spoiler, but eh.
That's all right. That one's been teased.
Yeah,
That one's been
a
teased.
lot, yeah.
So there are two other zones underground. So the first one you come into is actually the Ringing Deeps, and I think this is the zone where I felt the most in a cave,
Yeah.
but I feel like that was intended.
Yeah, that was by design. Like, this is the one that's like the cave zone. This is the
Mhm.
one that you felt like it was Zerlich Caverns 2.0, which is what everyone was worried this entire expansion would be. And you knew that they had to have one. And I was surprised by how much I liked this zone. I didn't think,
Yeah.
like, I went in, I had kind of flown through the different zones on the beta, but I didn't really do any of the questing. And I was surprised by how much like the storyline of this zone gripped me. I think it's pretty good. Again, it suffers from being compared to Hollowfall, which is not a fair comparison. But I like the architecture. I like the storylines. I think it's laid out well. Like, it really feels like it's. I feel like it's long and like has
Mhm.
like spindles that go off of the main thing, so it feels like you're like spelunking and exploring caves a little bit. I think it's a pretty good zone.
And the best part of it,
Hmm.
kobolds.
Kobolds, yeah.
Friendly kobolds.
Those fucking Chad kobolds, though, those are those are
The
nuts.
scary ones?
Yeah.
And then, so unfortunately, if I had to rank the zones, just my own personal rankings, it would be Hollow Falls number 1, Isle of Dorn number 2, Ringing Deeps 3, and sadly, Ashkahet would be fourth for me. I don't know if that's the same for you or not.
I think probably. I think that the honest truth is I've spent the least amount of time in Ashkahet because like I feel like the storyline in there is just starting. Like we haven't really
Mhm.
solved anything in there yet, and that's intentional, right? Like the raid takes place in there, so the end of this patch's storyline is going to take place in that zone. And also on early access, none of the world quests were open in that zone. It's all there's like a pretty complicated rep system in that zone where it's not just the renown like it is all the other ones. You have three different members of the resistance against the queen, and you have to like pick one to ally with, and then you get world quests related to that one. And none of that was open in early access, so there just wasn't a lot of reason to go into the zone besides the side quests. And it's the one I have done the least amount of the side story stuff, so I just haven't spent a lot of time in it. I mean, I think it's sufficiently like creepy. Like I really loved the Hollow Fall into Ashkahet, like part of the story where we like, you first go to the border and do all that stuff and then first get into the zone. I really liked that. I there's like weird troll people that I don't that are like introduced, but like we don't do a lot with. I'm like, okay, I guess we're saving this for later. Um, but the overall storyline, I mean, and the storyline of this city is interesting. And like the look of it is good, but it's very samey. Like it's supposed to be a big spider city, and so what it looks like is a big spider city where it's just a bunch of buildings all stacked up on top of each other, which is cool looking, but to interact with it is less cool, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think my biggest issue with this zone is Nerubian architecture and stuff like that isn't new to me.
Yeah, that's fair.
Whereas everything that they did in Hollowfall is like brand new. Which I guess that's a bad argument because dwarven architecture isn't necessarily new, and I really like the Isles of Dorn. So
Yeah, but that was like dwarven with a twist, right? Because like it was supposed to be like proto dwarven because it's the earthen,
mhm,
right? So yeah, and I think they are kind of trying to do that with the Nerubian stuff. I really feel like we have to circle back to this one like once the raid is out and done,
yeah.
and we've kind of done everything in Ashkahet we need to do. And maybe we'll have grown to appreciate it more. But I kind of agree with your ranking right now that's where that one falls, and it bums me out because like that 2D animation thing really got me like really jazzed about the Queen Ansarek storyline. And I mean, part of it is just because you know I mean we know how it's going to end because she's the raid boss. we
Mhm.
we know we know what's going to happen there. um but I guess we'll see once we do that.
Mhm. So another thing that you and I were pretty negative on initially were delves, and I don't know how many delves you've done actually since the games came out. Doing them while leveling, they were very much just a pushover mechanic. And I like caveat, I did level with a friend, so like every delve I did was two people and everything like that. I've done a couple since reaching max level, and let me tell you, they get significantly harder. But if you have any amount of like self sustain at all, they are not what I would consider extremely difficult.
Yeah.
More that they are somewhat annoying.
Yeah, I believe I've done them all like once. I think there might like basically whenever we got the side quests that tell you to go into a delve and do the delve for the quest, I did them. So I might have
Mhm.
missed one or two, but I think I've done all 12. Um, they're fine. I mean, like that's I feel like I was reading today on Reddit because now when I'm wasting time on the WoW subreddit, it's not wasting time. It's doing research for our podcast, which is how I've convinced myself I'm not wasting time. But I saw that like amongst a lot of the average players, they seem to be a pretty big hit, which is good.
Yeah.
I'm glad. I'm very happy for people. I still don't love them. I mean, I listened in an interview today that they are employing a similar technology that they did in Torghast, where like they balance it differently. Like if you're a healer that walks into a delve in a healer spec, basically they just massively reduce the HP of all the mobs you're fighting. I think they're probably doing something similar on the tank side, where they probably make them hit a little harder if you're coming in as a tank. Um, but I've soloed them all pretty easily. Nothing really. Yeah, I agree with you. There was some that were just annoying. Like I think all the underwater ones where you have to keep track of your breath meter is annoying. There was some stupid like fucking
There's a mushroom
spores.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those.
Oh,
I
you
think
have to,
they.
like, click a mushroom, and then there's things spinning around, but they'll, like, spawn on you half the time, so it just cancels you clicking on it.
I think I
Oh, it's so
read that
frustrating.
they fixed how those stupid spores track you and explode. Um, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So, I think delves as a whole have been a a fairly decent W that you and I are likely not going to interact with very much.
I do think it's really interesting that we're just not going to move beyond a 3 for these 2 weeks. Like,
Mhm.
it feels weird to me that, like, there's no like, I guess it makes sense from a design perspective that, like, everything season 4 and, or dealt number 4 on is part of the season. But like it just feels like they're the ones we have right now are meant for leveling up essentially. So there's just really no reason to interact with that system at all for the next 2 weeks, which feels like ironically like the only time I probably would have interacted with that system is during these next 2 weeks. And so yeah, the likelihood of me doing it. I mean, maybe like I have to say like doing the 13th delve um and getting that done to say I did it has a small amount of like attraction to me is getting that done, just to say you've done it. So maybe like late season when we're kind of bored and not really pushing very often, it'll be something I'll spend some time on. But I don't know.
Sure. How about the dungeons? How do you feel about the dungeons so far? Do you want to split these up into what will be season 1 dungeons versus what won't be, or just talk about all 8 of them as a whole?
I think if we split them up, the way we should split them up is the leveling ones versus the max level ones, because the leveling
Sure.
ones we did a lot because we leveled 5 or 6 characters in the same 4 dungeons over and over and over and over again. This, by the way, is a thing that they've been doing for a while now, where they've divided. There's always going to be 8 dungeons in expansion. They're always going to divide it 4 and 4 for end of game and then leveling. I feel like they should have more in the level. 4 is like a number where I don't think I ever got the same one twice in a row, but it still feels like you're doing the same dungeons a lot. For
Do
4
we
dungeons
really
for 10
care?
levels.
Do we really care that there are only 4? Like, would it be a problem if all 8 were leveling dungeons
I don't think so.
and
Like,
then we did them at max level?
yeah. No. I don't understand why there's this weird distinction like that they've made, that like these ones are designed to be max level dungeons and these ones are not. Like they all have scaling at max level built into them, right? Like even the leveling ones. So
Mhm.
I yeah, I don't get it. I don't really understand. um
Yeah, it feels weird. I will say I agree with you
mhm.
on that. But the dungeons, I think, are interesting.
I like them, and I think we're gonna have some differing opinions on some of these, based on the conversations we've had over the course of the last few days. But I am pretty high on just about all of them. I think, if we're talking specific to the leveling ones, I like them all. I think, I mean, let me just go through it in my head real quick. You have the Rookery. I think that's a fun dungeon. The biggest problem with talking about these dungeons right now is we've barely begun to see the actual mechanics of the boss fights. So like I
Mhm.
just can't tell you if I like this boss or not yet. Like in the Rookery, I have no idea what any of those bosses do, like at all. I think the first boss I kind of have an idea. The second boss, I have no idea what that guy does. I have no idea. He falls over. That's what he does. And the third one, couldn't tell you. So I think they see like, so mostly what I'm judging off of here is like aesthetic and flow of the dungeons, and I like all the leveling ones. I like quite a bit. I think probably my favorite of those 4 is Priory of the Sacred Flame, just because I'm a Hollowfall stan, and I like the aesthetic of the church. I mean, it reminds me of Scarlet Monastery back in the day, but like cooler. So I really enjoy that one. But I don't know. What do
Yeah,
you think of these
I
4?
I like the 4 dungeons that we have. I think City of Echoes is probably my least favorite. Um, but that's just because of the fact that I don't I don't love the whole kill 3 mini bosses to summon a boss, but then we're gonna also put shit that's annoying in your way kind of design.
We're doing that a
Yeah.
lot in these dungeons. We're doing
Yeah.
that a lot in these dungeons.
So I don't love that, but I mean that being said, I don't think City of Echoes is a bad dungeon,
Mm-mm.
right? Like I definitely think that it's still good. I think of the 4 leveling dungeons, my favorite is probably the same as yours. Um, and I think that the way that they do the first boss in that dungeon is significantly better than the way that they did it in Court of Stars. So I think
Mhm.
that's a good thing.
Especially
Um,
since we just skipped it half the time and just 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 pulled it at
well,
full strength, almost full strength.
that was with a level 70 scaling
Yeah,
and everything else.
I do. So I did that one on heroic last night, which meant like probably needed to pull one of the extra guys. I was worried about that dungeon because when you know you open up the map and you see where the 3 lieutenants are, and you're like, oh, does the game really? Are we gonna have to really pull all 3 of these guys before we can pull the boss? And that means running all around this introductory area. We're gonna spend 50% of the key timer in this one area, and I was really worried that would kill the boss or kill the dungeon for me. But it seems like you only have to do 2 of them, and like it feels very natural to do one and then go off to the side and do the other and then just run straight to the boss and do that. So I'm a lot less worried about that interaction now.
Yeah, I actually think he will not send his last lieutenant away.
Yeah.
So I think you get a choice on which
Yeah.
lieutenant stays with him.
And that could
And
be fun for routing purposes in a Mythic Plus. I think, yeah, that would be cool.
I think you can skip the first one.
Yeah, yeah, you can.
Nobody has yet.
He just I think he just like paths around the fountain in the middle. I think the first one is going to be probably one you always want to get if you have a paladin or a priest, because that you get like a half-hour buff from that thing in the middle of the fountain if you have a paladin or priest, and it's pretty good. It's like damage and healing. It's a pretty good buff. Like you definitely want
Yeah.
to take advantage of that if you have that in your group. So I see him being the most obvious one to pull, although his knockback is pretty annoying. I it's a weird knockback in the way it behaves, by the way, because like I've put my ass to the fountain to try to get knocked into it, and like I've watched my character like go around the circular lip of the fountain in my pushback. Like he doesn't just go straight back. Like it's gone around and back. So it's a little weird.
The other thing that I was going to say is that summons, so he has 3 lieutenants by him, and
Hmm.
killing each mini boss brings a lieutenant over that then you can kill, which is essentially another mini boss. We've never pulled the boss with only the lieutenant from that first mini boss
Oh
being on
yeah,
him. So I don't even know what that lieutenant does
might be the
during the boss
easiest
fight.
one. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
don't feel like she does a lot when you fight her. I'm assuming what she does when you fight her is the same as what she'll do when she's with the boss. It's just that that overlaying with some of his abilities could be harder or easier. I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that type of design. I do like that. I think it's cool. I think it allows for interesting routing conversations and strategies that could change as you go up key level. I think that that's part of the reason why I'm so excited about that. That's a season 2 dungeon. We're not going to see that for a little while. But yeah, definitely really cool.
So we haven't talked about the other leveling dungeons quite as much. I do have one complaint with the rookery. I think the whole like grab a feather and fall down garbage is not interesting. Like I
Yeah.
feel like the dungeon could have done without that. Um,
I've gotten like when I was first doing it, it felt like it took forever to get down there now, and now like I know my route and path to get down there in as little clicks of the thingy as possible. So it's annoying me a lot less, but I kind of agree with you that that doesn't feel great. It's the
yeah,
type of
like
thing
why
where
not just put water
yeah, I
down there and
like it
jump?
aesthetically. Like it's a cool like you're in this big tower and delving deep into the tower, and that's cool, but from thinking about it as a key dungeon, it's going to be kind of annoying, I think.
And I'm a like, what if that slam scales with key level, and now you're required for your entire group to hit the first pack with the like slam ability or something like that? You
Does it do
know, like
damage? I've hit the pack with
I,
it before, but I don't know if
I
I've
don't
paid
know if it
attention
deals
to how much
damage.
it does. Yeah.
I haven't actually read. I know that if you hit the eggs on your way down, it summons little birds that fly up and fly away. The storm rooks. Um, and then we've talked about City of Echoes a little bit. And the last one is Stone Vault, which is so it's City of Echoes and Stone Vault will both be in season 1.
Correct.
I think Stone Vault is fine. The problem I have with Stone Vault is all of the
There's a
backtracking.
lot of
I don't
backtracking.
like that
Yeah.
at all. And like they give you a minecart that like teleports you back to the main room. And I'm assuming the graveyard is always going to be at the start. So if like you die on a boss, your team kills a boss, you can just release and you'll be back with them in no time.
Mhm.
I think all of that's good. But like I don't I like that you have a choice on where you go first. I like that the bosses don't seem too super deep into whatever side you pick. But I also wish that there was a better way to go about this rather than you have to literally walk backwards from where you already have went. Uh, that is not fun for me when I think about it from like a Mythic Plus
Yeah.
standpoint. I also wish that one of the bosses minecarts was in the boss room,
That's
and yeah,
that's exactly
it's
what I was gonna
annoying.
say. That if like one of the bosses, the minecart is in the room. If the other one was that way, I think we would be complaining about this a lot less. But yeah, the worst part of this dungeon is you kill that double boss where it has the mech loader and the person, and then you have to run all the way back into the previous room you were in before to get to the minecart, and that run just feels like it takes forever and is really frustrating.
Mhm.
So yeah, yeah. Definitely not my favorite. I think this is I think is going to be one of the most challenging dungeons in the season, based on what I've seen on how some of these Mythic Plus abilities scale, especially that two boss dungeon or that two boss encounter we were just talking about. Like that one seems like it's gonna be really, really hectic and confusing. I think it's gonna be fun. Um, but yeah, the layout. I think you're right. Like try to avoid backtracking as much as possible in these dungeons, and this one definitely has a lot
Mhm.
of it.
Yeah. So that brings us to the 3 dungeons that are level 80 dungeons. And thematically, I think a lot of these are super
I
cool.
love them
So
all. Well, almost all.
we have shit talked the Dawnbreaker before, and I'm just going to rip the band aid off on this one. I think this dungeon still sucks. I don't like this place at all.
I think the problem is it just is still broken. Like I ran it once on heroic, and the ships that you're supposed to fly to at the beginning, because the Dawnbreaker gets webbed up by those other ships, and you fly over there and you kill the Nerubians making the webs. I couldn't see them; they just weren't there for me. Me and another person in my group just couldn't see them, and the other three people had to go kill it by themselves. So we were just sitting there waiting. So the dungeon's still broken. I also still think it's once again we have another dragon riding dungeon that does the same thing that Nokud did, which is like we're going to control how you approach this by making you land at various points where they're key mobs you have to kill at each of the various points, which feels like it would allow you to route and have fun, but in reality it's just you must kill these three things in this order before you can do this thing. I also think it's pretty tough to tell, and I think this is a problem that will go away as you get used to the dungeon, but it's very difficult to tell where's the right point of entry on these mini bosses to go. And some of their abilities are really brutal. Like one of them has this big giant ball he shoots at you, and the ball the amount of damage the ball does is based on its distance from you. So if it like hits a wall near you, like in a high mythic plus, it's just going to kill you. And so you need to
Mhm.
fight that mini boss in basically a place with like a long just corridor. So you have to be very smart and intentional about how you do that. And because the mini bosses give the boss all of their abilities, then you also have to fight the boss. The boss passes around, but you have to fight the boss in an area that has like a long corridor that you can bait this thing down. And it ultimately like feels like it, like we're faking choice here. Like you don't really have a choice how you actually manage this dungeon at all. It just ends
Yeah.
up being a clusterfuck, and it like it's hard to get a group of 5 people on skywriting like grouped up together in a controlled way. And like you're gonna fuck so many keys up just by people landing wrong and stuff like that.
Or not getting an orb on the final boss
Yeah,
like during the intermission
yeah,
phase or
yeah.
some stupid shit like that.
Also, you still can't go flight form to get out of the giant exploding thing on the first boss, and that really bugs the shit out of me because I died from that because I did not have a mount on my bar because I flight form. I was like, oh fuck, and I was like frantically trying to open my. And it's funny because this same thing happened to me on beta, and I just forgot about it. And maybe I was like oh, I bet they'll fix it. Um, and they did not.
I think the other one that you and I are both fairly low on is City of Threads. Um, I
Yeah.
think that I was talking about this the other day, though. I think that there is a solution to this where the like find the imposter like mini game that you have to do after the first boss, if they just have that either be set spawn locations or like a set of like 5 different locations or something like that, I think this becomes infinitely easier for Mythic Plus. If it is, which like it might be, right? Like it might only be 5. We haven't done the dungeon enough to really know, but I can just see this being a huge, 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 huge pain point and waste of time because if you get seen by the mobs that have the like vision circle around them, you just get sent back to the beginning after getting channeled on for a while. There's nothing you can do about it. There's not really like any way around it. Sometimes you just have to stand there and wait. So I can see this being a really big pain point and an annoyance.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with everything you just said there on this one. I also think like if it is just set spawn points, like it's just going to be lame and unfun. Like it's either going to be really annoyingly random or it's going to be lame and unfun. And
Mhm.
that's kind of like why I'm pretty down on it. It's a shame because I think like after that point the dungeon becomes really, I think before that little segment and after that little segment, I actually really like the the dungeon overall. So
Oh, I think that's one of the most interesting first bosses
yeah,
in any of the dungeons.
yeah, it's
Like
really cool.
restricting the amount of room that you have. Like obviously I don't play a caster and I'm sure casters hate everything that I'm fucking saying right now because they're like my tank just keeps yoinking me in the middle of my cast blah 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 blah. But yeah, I think it's super interesting to restrict your area so much. It reminds me of that mob in Tazavesh that had the same mechanic, but that was only a mini boss. This is
Mhm.
like a full-on boss that has mechanics and will drop shit on the ground and
Yeah,
shoot things. Like you have to play with your space pretty wisely.
yeah, yeah. No, it's great. It's great. Except for that little mini area. It just takes like I feel like even if you know exactly where they are, it's going to take too long. It's going to be
Mhm.
like it when you're in a timed dungeon, running around not killing things is frustrating and stressful. And that's kind of what they've created with this thing.
Yeah, it's gonna be what anywhere between 2 and 4 minutes that you're gonna spend doing that, right?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a lot of time. That's a
Especially
lot of time out of a 30-minute timer.
And especially after you've done it, like then you have to wait for the guy to walk up the ramp to activate the second boss area. And like again, if there's ever a moment in a timed dungeon where you are waiting for an NPC to do something, that just even if like the timer is increased to account for that moment, it just feels bad. It feels
Mhm.
frustrating. It feels like I'm just standing here not doing anything, waiting for a computer to let me play the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, that's not great.
Um, what's next? I think the most aesthetically interesting dungeon is the meadery to me.
I love these next two dungeons. The Meadery and Dark Clef, whatever. I love them both
Yeah.
so much. I love them. I cannot wait to do these dungeons in Mythic Plus. And I know with Dark Cleft or whatever, you have a thing you're going to talk about. I disagree. I think it's great. I think it's great.
So the meadery, I think, is actually a super interesting dungeon. Though I have been running into an issue on that dungeon. And
To be clear,
I
I've
think
only
it
done
is
it once,
going
so I'm not. Go ahead.
I think this is going to be a very glaring problem in Mythic Plus. So you have the first boss, which is honestly super cool. The way that they did this first boss, A plus. Like yeah, it has one of the most interesting like intermission phases I've
Yeah,
ever done
we have to
ever.
serve beer to angry people. Yeah,
Yeah, it's awesome. And I imagine that's going to be coupled with a bunch of raid wide or group wide damage.
yeah.
So your healer is going to be stressed, which like, I mean, stressing out healers is always funny, so that's fine. um, but yeah, so first boss, giant A plus for me. Um, Second boss is the one that's like the IPA guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is the boss I have a problem with.
Okay.
So in this room, there are scientists that drop these like explosive brew totems,
Mhm.
and the totems have a ton of health even on heroic. Like it takes your entire group swapping to them to kill them on heroic.
They do, yeah.
And they deal like um what is it? Somebody read the tooltip the other day. When it goes off, it's like 100,000 damage or 200,000 damage a second
Mhm.
for the duration of the debuff that you get, which you add scaling to that and you get into like a plus 10. That's going to kill you.
Oh, yeah.
And their health is going to scale. So I'm really worried about these totems. Them along with the totems at the end of Stone Vault. Um, it's never fun to have to switch to things like this. I mean, I'm thinking back to Brackenhide right now,
Yeah.
where it's like this is a must kill or die situation, and it just I don't know. I don't like it. If it is that, it needs to be less health. It needs to be like two people switching to it can kill the thing.
Especially, like, the problem with totem mechanics is you're pulling a shit ton of mobs, and there's a shit ton of swirlies because everything does stuff, and then finding the totem to click on, because you have to click on it because none of it, you can't kill a totem with an AoE ability, right? So you have to click
Mhm.
on the totem. It just becomes very hectic. Like, I agree. Like, that was my biggest problem with Brackenhide. It was that, like, the totem will be coming, the totem would go off, and then you're like frantically looking around at your screen, like trying to parse all the things that are happening to find the totem to click on it, and then also have enough time to DPS it down. That is difficult. And even like I think the plater profile we use right now is atrocities, and it's like definitely trying to draw your attention to the totem a little bit better, but it's still just in the hecticness of everything. Of you're looking at your weak auras, you're looking at timers, you're looking at the mobs, you're trying not to stand in things, like finding a totem in the sea of that mess to click on and kill is hard. So yeah, I'm generally against those mechanics. Like, I think if you could handle them differently, I would be all right with them. Like, I don't want to just make it so like AoE damage hurts them, because then you're just going to cleave them down every time, and like that just it becomes a non thing. So why even have it? So I don't know how to fix it, but I don't like it.
The other thing that I was gonna say with Plater, and anybody listening to this, correct me if I'm wrong, and if you know how to solve this, please let me know. Leave a comment, message us something. But like, if you emphasize a health bar, it should not move. Its unit frame should not move.
Yeah.
Like the fact that if you have 60 mobs all pulled in a pack, and this thing that I'm trying to click on is just like all over the place the entire time,
Yeah.
dude.
It's
The
hard.
amount of times I've wanted to break something over that is
That
just astronomical.
that's been honestly that's been the biggest shift to me in tanking, and the struggles I've had is just a mob is coming into the pack or something, and you need to like grab it to taunt it or to hit it with something to pull it in, and like you just miss with your mouse, and like think I think I clicked it, so I mashed taunt, and nope, I had clicked something else and I didn't notice it in time, and now my taunt's on cooldown. Oh, okay, bummer. That's it's tough in general, and so it's something I need to get better at as a tank. But yeah, it's definitely very hard with these totems too. But
Yeah.
man, that's a good dungeon though. That's so like
Uh,
the final boss and the bees and like everything. Oh, I love it.
yeah. I still don't know what the third boss does. You can mount bees, and there's like these honey pots. I don't know what you're supposed to do with them. I
Yeah.
can guess. I think you're supposed to run the bees into the honey pots or something like that. Uh, but the other problem I have with the second boss is there's these globules that spawn, and they spawn not very far from the boss. But if they hit the boss, it deals a ton of raid wide damage and gives the boss a huge shield.
Mm-hmm.
They can be CC'd. So I think the play is you CC them and then your tank pulls the boss away. But I think that they spawn just a little bit too close to the boss right now. So like extend the range at which they spawn, and I think that mechanic gets a lot more intuitive to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then the final boss, we did not understand what this boss did when we did it on normal because we just zerged it and we were like, oh, you drop shit on these barrels and then they explode and then they can cause like chain reactions and everything like that. Well, come to find out, X amount of time into the boss fight, she'll just jump up on a table and then light them all on fire. So the right thing to do is controlled destruction of these barrels.
See,
Get rid of some of them before that.
I love mechanics like that. I love that. I love the this is one of my favorite things they do in this game is the idea of like you have to break you don't want to break these things, but also the game's going to kind of make you break them in a controlled way, and if you don't, it's going to punish you. Like the Etna, the stone vault, I think is the name of the dungeon. Is that the name of the
Mhm.
dungeon? This the first boss
Yeah,
of
the
Stone
first boss.
Vault does the same
Yeah.
thing where like they'll spawn little earth spikes, and every time you blow up an earth spike, it will put a stacking dot on people. And you would think, okay, well then I just don't want to blow up the earth spikes. Like but if you do that for too long, she's just gonna blow up all the earth spikes at the same time. It's like it's the same general mechanic, but it's always fun because it makes the fight dynamic, and you have to be making like active choices on like how many do you think we can handle here. Think we can handle this many? Okay, let's do it. Love it, love it, love it, love it.
Mhm. So the final dungeon that we have not talked about yet uh, is it's escaping me. Which one is it?
It is Dark Flame Cleft. It is the Cobalt
Yes.
dungeon.
So I think everything about this dungeon aesthetically and all of that is amazing. The first area as a melee is super fucking frustrating because there's these giant kobolds that do this slam, and it's hilarious because if you get hit by it, you get launched, but it also launches the other little kobolds if they get hit by
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So it is hysterical to watch, but it's super annoying as a melee because sometimes you have to pull like two of these big guys and they're desynced, and then you run into the same problem that you had in Throne of the Four Winds, or not Throne of the Four Winds, Vortex Pinnacle. That's what it
Yep.
is, not the raid. Uh, so that's frustrating. And then I think the bosses as a whole are super cool. The first boss, when we pulled him, and then like immediately there's a minecart like charging at you at like Mach 5 speed, and you're just like, oh shit. Like that was
I
hilarious to
love
me.
it. I love it.
um, and then the second boss, I still don't know what the second boss does. There's like this mechanic where it like splits up the room in these pie slices and then it goes all dark. I don't know what you're actually supposed to do
That's the
there.
candle
I'm
one,
sure.
right? Yeah, I have no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, yeah. It's the wax
The
dude.
waxed, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the Candle King,
Don't know
which
what that
I
does
still
either.
yeah, I don't know what we're supposed to do there yet,
I
but
think
he
we're
looks like
supposed
he
to
has some cool
I
mechanics.
think we're supposed to melt the wax copies of us, but I don't know why.
Yeah. Uh, and then, man, the final boss I think is super cool. So getting to the final boss is what you are expecting me to complain about, and I am going to complain about it. I think in a Mythic Plus scenario, this is going to be potentially super annoying, and I think with mob scaling, having somebody that isn't a tank go out and grab stuff and potentially pull shit and then get one shot is going to be super annoying. But that being said, I think that this is an interesting thing that we have never had to really interact with before in Mythic Plus. So I don't want to be super negative on it yet until we've actually experienced it.
This is why I love it. You are absolutely right. It could be very annoying. I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, I'm pretty sure the candle spawn locations are fixed. I'm pretty sure candles are in the same place. So I do think there's going to be a time, a month or two into the season, when we just know who's responsible to get the candles, which ones they're responsible to getting, and how you handle that. And I think it's going to be a very cool thing to kind of figure out how to manage as the keys scale up. And I think like so here's the thing I struggle with at times. I don't want them to design dungeons entirely for Mythic Plus. I want them to
Mhm.
do fun, new, refreshing dungeon ideas when the dungeon calls for it. And so it would break my heart a little bit if like an idea like this, which is so perfect for a kobold dungeon, is tossed away for the sake of Mythic Plus. I would much rather them find a way of taking these cool ideas and then bringing them into the Mythic Plus system. So I agree it could end up being very frustrating, but I think it's fun. I do think it's fun to like you're you're fighting all these mobs as you're going through the darkness and everyone's huddled around the candle, and it's like, oh, there's a candle out there, ping, go get it, and someone has to run out and get it and bring it back, and of course they're going to bring a bunch of mobs with them, so like I have friends like just and you're constantly moving along the course. Like I think it's really cool, and it's capped off with just the most fun boss fight introduction ever, which is you're riding on the minecart being chased by the final boss, and you actually get to interact with it and throw dynamite at it, which reduce its overall health in the final fight. So you're like, it's an advantage to be as efficient with that dynamite as possible. Like, it's so fun, man.
The
I can't wait to do this dungeon.
If you are going to make us do nothing, this is the right way to do it,
Yeah.
not the way City of Threads is doing it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like putting us on a minecart, throwing dynamite at the boss, and making it a mini game where details tells you who wins at the end of it. Like that is peak of like doing nothing in a time dungeon doesn't feel like doing nothing.
Yeah, this is exactly like in all the Tindril prog, hundreds and hundreds of pulls, that it just, as people like became broken a little bit as they kept doing it, um like they started to have a competition of who can get to the next platform as fast as possible, and like a weak aura was developed that would track times from one platform to the other, so they turned it into a race as just like a side thing to entertain themselves. And this is essentially Blizzard bringing that concept into the game, where it's going to make this little mini game. And yeah, I love the details. Day one is tracking this thing, like it makes me so happy. It's so fun. And that final fight is really cool too. It's like taking the seed or bomb mechanic from Halandris and putting it in a Mythic Plus dungeon, where you have to maintain the candle's light, but also the boss will occasionally point towards the candle with a big ray beam, and you need to pick it up and move it out of the way in time. Really, really cool. Really cool.
The one problem I have with that final boss and picking up the candle and moving it is it's a channel to pick up the candle.
Yeah, that's
Like
not
you have to
great.
sit there and cast for a little bit.
That's not great. Yeah, that was not how it
I'm
worked
a
with the seeds, right? You just clicked on it and picked it
no.
up. Yeah.
You Yeah. I'm assuming the reason for this is it's super hectic and so they don't want people to just click on it randomly and start running around with the candle.
Yeah.
So it makes sense why they kind of put that in there. But when you need to move it immediately and you have to stand there for a second and cast on it to be able to pick it up and move, it is frustrating.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that is
Yeah.
one thing that I could see be something to improve on.
Yeah. But I mean, so when we look at it, the four dungeons that we're going to have in season 2, we have Cinderbrew Meadery, we have Dark Flame Cleft, we have Priory of the Sacred Flame, and we have the Rookery, right? Those are the four, I'm pretty
hmm
sure. I'm I'm pretty I'm pretty positive, like I'm pretty up on all these. Like
A
um
priory scares me. They're like, if you've done this dungeon on heroic in
it
normal,
hurts.
that second boss room
Yeah.
is
It hurts.
fucking crazy.
It hurts, and yeah, like grouping the mobs is a pain in the ass. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough, but I think in a challenging way. Like there's gonna be like the best way to break that room, and you're gonna like have to figure it out and work on it, and it's gonna change because the amount of mobs you can pull is gonna change as you scale up.
hmm
But it's gonna be fun. So I have a question for you at the end of this dungeon conversation, which is, we have been doing heroic dungeons for basically just a day now. We're recording this on Tuesday. The game heroic dungeons only unlocked at 5 o'clock on Monday. I've done You've done probably more than me, but I've only done like a handful. I've done 6 or 7 maybe.
Mm.
I feel I feel too easy to me.
Yeah. They definitely don't feel like a Mythic Zero.
Yeah.
That's what I would
So
say.
so yeah, the important context here is that with the key changes, heroic dungeons are supposed to be the new M0s, and M0s are supposed to be the new Mythic 10s. So like it's not like Mythic Zeros and Dragonflight were like particularly hard, right? They were just like, if you come in with fresh gear, you're gonna be a little bit challenged. You're gonna have to take it a little bit seriously. Um, and that is not the case with these heroics at all.
Mhm.
As you said, we still don't know some of the boss mechanics because they don't do enough for us to care about them. By the way, while we were talking, I looked up the Kobold King, or the Candle King boss, and the reason you have to melt the wax statues of yourself is because while those are up, it does ticking damage to everyone in the group. But we didn't notice that at all because it's not doing any damage. Um, so it feels like they're too easy, and I guess I'm all right with that. It's just like, what was the point of all the changes we made? Like,
Mhm.
if this is just like they're just like slightly harder than normal dungeons, which is what they feel like
Well,
right now. Like I'm not particularly geared, and I am having no problem tanking any of these. Like I can pull big and just have no problem at all.
I'm interested to see what the Mythic Zeros are going to look like because that's essentially going to be a Mythic 10, which is a fairly significant jump up from what is supposed to be a Mythic Zero. So
Yeah. I hope they're
I'll
hard.
be interested to see.
I
Yeah.
I hope they're difficult. I want them to be difficult. Especially like this is the only time they should be difficult when you're coming in, you don't have a lot of gear, you're coming in fresh with we're probably I would say by the time the Mythic Zeros open, we're probably going to be in the low 580s. Because 580 is what you can upgrade to without crests. So, if you spam a lot of heroics, you're probably going to get all heroic pieces upgrade them up to 580 just using flight stones or valor stones, whatever. And then you'll upgrade some of them to 593, which is the cap on that gear, using the crests you have. But I don't think you will have enough crests by M0 time to upgrade everything to 593. So I'm guessing
Yep.
like if you like go really degenerate and also get the renowned gear, you could maybe get up to like 587 or something. But I think us normal people will probably be around 582, 583, maybe 585. And at that level, the M0 should be challenging, and I really really hope they are.
Mhm. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, we have 2 weeks of doing heroics, and I have a feeling that after this first week, you and I might not even be doing them that much anymore,
I'm
which
just gonna
is,
end up doing them on a bunch of my characters. Like I'm just gonna finish on my druid probably by the weekend, and then I'm just gonna. I guess I'll get some gear on my warrior, and I'll just do
yeah.
that. I don't know.
Yeah, it feels a little sad. And we knew that this was going to happen,
We did.
but
Yep.
we'll see how it all plays out. I mean, a month after everything releases, a month after raid releases, we're never going to remember this time again.
Nope.
So,
Nope. Nope.
but right now it feels kind of bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It does.
um, One more thing that I wanted to touch on, because we are running out of time, is the classes that you've played so far and just kind of how they feel.
Hmm.
So earlier on, I've already said that I think that everything that I have played so far has felt amazing.
So what
Um,
what are those classes that you played?
So the first thing I started with was Shaman. Started with Ellie Shaman, and then I did my Hunter, which was the one that I was going to level first. And then I went to Evoker, uh, Mage, Death Knight, and the final one I've leveled is Paladin. And all of these are DPS specs. So
Hmm.
Evoker, I've only played Devastation, but from my understanding and messing around with AUG after hitting max level, uh, AUG essentially has a hero tree that gives AUG everything AUG wants. Like it turns their hover or yeah, I think it's hover, whatever their be able to cast while moving dash thing is.
Yeah.
It turns that into a blink.
Hmm.
Yeah, it gives them everything that they want. So Chrono Warden for AUG is just like A plus. um Obviously Death Knight stays winning right now. Like everything about Death Knight besides maybe Sand Lane is like absolutely phenomenal. um so that's been extremely fun. Survival is extremely fun. For Hunter, I haven't really played very much BM or Marksman. To my understanding, Marksman's still super fun and good rotationally in AoE, and still suffers from the same issue where their single target's rather lacking.
Hmm.
And the Hunter class tree is rather expensive, locking good nodes behind shit nodes that have 2 point costs and stuff like that. Um, and then what else? What else did I say? Mage, obviously, Arcane is extremely fun. I've gushed about that on the podcast a few times before this. Paladin is always like that's like my comfort pick for a
Hmm.
class, and they just feel better and have this like huge big bonk hammer now that they use, which is like super satisfying. Um, and then I'm missing one. Shaman. Shaman's the only one I haven't talked about, I think.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, Ellie feels super good. It does feel a little bit, I don't know, easy right now. Like you are essentially just pressing lightning bolt or chain lightning at any given time, always, and that's like 90% of your damage.
I thought you liked
Uh,
easy. I thought you liked easy specs.
I do, but it feels weird for a caster to just press the same button over and over again.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like casters should have more to them, which is one thing. Like comparing everything I've played to survival, survival just kind of feels like it. The rotation makes sense to the point where it like almost plays itself if you are pressing the buttons correctly.
Hmm.
Like everything feeds back into itself and just like makes sense. Uh, DK is the standard DK. If you're used to DK, you'll know what's going on there. But obviously, you have two resources, which is pretty unique to DK, and everything else.
Hmm.
Anyways, pretty long rant to say all the six classes I've played so far, A plus game design wise. I don't have much to complain about. I have heard negative things about like Demon Hunter and Rogue, and obviously, like the DPS Druids don't seem like they're super happy.
Yeah.
But how about you? How about tanking?
I think all the tanks. Obviously, this is the Demon Hunter notwithstanding because I haven't played it, but I think all the tanks feel pretty good. I think Paladin definitely felt the weakest to me. Like so, for those that didn't play early access and perhaps won't be playing until after they absolutely kill the scaling tomorrow, like basically every tank does not have to touch their active mitigation until the late levels, but like 79 as a protection paladin felt significantly squishier than any other tank that I played this weekend. Um, I played the Lightsmith hero talent build, and I just think that's not fun at all. I did not like that at all, and I'm bummed because like I want to be the Templar, but from everything I've read, the Templar build is just so much harder to execute because of the 5 holy power costs on the ability. It's just trying to maintain your shield of the righteousness active, especially early in expansion when your haste is low, and doing that is just really clunky and unfun from what I've understood, so I didn't even try it. So that's like the one that definitely feels the weakest to me, and that lines up with everything that I had been reading. Bear is fun. If look, if you if you want to get into tanking but are afraid, play Bear. It's
Mhm.
so easy. It like you cannot fuck it up. I promise you, you cannot fuck it up. Especially if you do Elun's Chosen Bear. Like I think Bear has always been the easy tank, but like with the Elun's Chosen hero talent tree, it's now like even easier. Like you can't mess up. You just you just press the buttons and you have a less than 1 minute cooldown that will always like turn your mastery into overdrive and also your self-healing, and it's just like it's just really fun. It's really simple, so it allows you to like really focus and learn the mechanics of the dungeon because you can pay attention to them because you're not worrying about your rotation. um I really enjoyed Brewmaster, although I think like the problem with Brewmaster is A, I think the hero talents are pretty uninteresting, and B, just the scaling, just like you really didn't get to experience what's the best about Brew, which is just how they stagger damage. Like it's like I just didn't have to press Purifying Brew very often at all in these dungeons. I just didn't have to. But like I would press it anyway because it's like good. It's good for your rotation to be doing it, just not overcapping on it, even if you don't really need to clear any stagger. The hero talents are really boring for me there. Warrior
Mhm.
is awesome. Like Mountain Thane Warrior is so much fun. You have so much rage. You're doing these big, amazing thunderclaps every so often. Like I feel like Avatar is off cooldown like every 30 seconds. It's fucking insane. It's so fun. It's so fun. I mean, it's a lot of buttons, and I'm not good at it yet. Like what that means is I'm like very good at the core rotational stuff, but like super bad at paying attention to spell reflect and knowing what to spell reflect and when. But that's the type of stuff that comes with time. And Death Knight is awesome. The Deathbringer Death Knight tree is it feels so good. It feels so good. Um, so the way it works, I don't know if you know the way it works for blood, but blood, I forget what the ability's called. What's the ability called? Let me look it up.
Talking about the dot.
Reaper's Mark. Yeah, Reaper's
Yeah.
Mark. So the way Reaper's Mark works for blood is, it puts the mark on the thing, and then when it explodes, you get an additional ability. On blood, that goes on Morrowrend, which is your bone shield stacker. So it makes the next two of them free and it turns them into this awesome scythe ability. So not only does it like feel very good to press that ability because you get this very visual and audible sound of like this the giant scythe like going whoosh, whoosh. It's really cool, but also like on a spec that has in its rework become a lot about maintaining bone shield charges as not only, defensive but also offensive ability. um it just makes it so much easier to maintain your bone shield charges because you're getting all these free Morrow Rens all the time. And so just like maintaining those bone shields has never been easier. And the build is centered around spending and acquiring those. And so it just synergizes perfect and it just feels so fun to play. It's just so like I'm bad at it. And leveling up in normal dungeons does not allow you to be good at it because there's so few times where you need to use a death strike to complete heal yourself back up. But just like the general rotation is so fun and satisfying. Like honestly, to the point where I felt like I was overcapping on runes a lot because I was getting so many free procs of things that I didn't need to spend runes on, that I was just like, I need to spend these runes, but I have nothing to spend them on. Like I need to heart strike, but I also have this awesome Morrow Ren that's gonna do this cool thing and do more damage. So yeah, it was. I need to get better at it, but it's really fun. It's really fun.
So the one thing that I will say that's interesting about the Deathbringer hero talent, and kind of sad. So the reason Frost plays Deathbringer over Ryder isn't because Ryder is bad. Ryder is also extremely good, but nothing on Ryder scales with Frost's mastery, which is just increased frost damage.
Mm-hmm.
And everything about Deathbringer scales with their mastery because it's shadow frost damage.
Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah. So if they had a horseman that dealt frost damage and it scaled with their mastery, I bet that they would be like pretty neck and
They
neck.
should make that change. They should. Because, I mean, I think the goal should be that they need to try to get these two trees as balanced as possible. Like, the ultimate version of this is the decision you're making on your hero tree is just a play style decision. It's like, what do you like playing more? And it's like, do I like having this big fucking scythe shit all the time? Yes, I do. I do like that, so I want to play that. And that I feel like that is the case in some specs, but not all. Like in some, there's just a clear winner. Like in Bear, like in Mythic Plus, you're just never gonna run Druid of the Claw, and in Raid, you're probably never gonna run a Loon's Chosen. It's just like in Raid, in single target Raid, is like Druid of the Claw is just the best because you can do the cat weaving stuff in Raid actually, and you will just do more damage and you're just as tanky. And also to get some of the abilities that you need for a Loon's Chosen to work, you have to like heavily invest in one side of the talent tree to lose a little bit of the defensiveness. So it's the system isn't perfect, and one good thing about it being evergreen is that they are going to continue to iterate on it like they did in Dragonflight with the original talent trees. So I do hope we're at a place at some point where they're very, very close together, and what you're choosing really is gameplay. You're choosing, do I want a cat weave? Or do I want to lean into the cool sparkly moon stuff?
Yeah.
That's the hope. We'll see.
Yeah. So I think pretty much from everything that you and I have said, pretty much in agreement where class design is pretty good. It sounds like paladin tanking is maybe in need of a little bit of love.
Yeah,
Other than that, I think they're all pretty good.
I'm pretty
It's a good
impressed.
time. Yeah, good time to be playing World of Warcraft.
Yeah,
I think class wise as a whole, almost every class is happy with at least something that has came in.
yeah.
Obviously, like I said, barring like rogues and demon hunters, I'm trying to remember priests. Maybe priests might be a little upset.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
depends. Like, and I haven't played healers this expansion yet, but I've been like, I've been paying attention to the healer, and Resto Druids are pretty disappointed right now. I think both of their trees are pretty lame, and Druids just not feeling too good right now. Yeah, Disc Priests, despite the fact that there's definitely going to be one in the Race to World first, because there always is, Disc Priest is not in a good place right now. The fortunate part for Priests is they always have, if they want to heal, they always have Holy to go back to, which seems like it's pretty decent right now.
hmm
But but yeah, I mean, I think everything's like the tank conversation is really interesting because talking about what do we think is going to be meta. um it can be really up in the air, and even if there is one that ends up being meta, I don't think we're going to see a season 3 and season 4 problem where it's just going to be demon hunter in like every high key. I think we're going to see a lot of different tank coverage in high keys. There will probably be one that ends up being slightly better and is in the comps that are pushing like the highest keys. But I think it's gonna be very close to Dragonflight season 1 in things are going to feel pretty closely balanced across the board,
Mhm.
except for Moonkins.
Um, one final thing, yeah, well, sad Moonkins and sad Fire Mages, both of them
I
not in a
can't believe
great spot
it's
right
just
now.
so weird to me that Fire Mage is the worst mage spec right now. Like that's
It's like the worst
crazy.
DPS in the game
That's
right now. Its
crazy.
AoE is all right, but its single target is pretty miserable. Um, one other thing that I thought about while we were talking, and I talked about this a little bit on one of my streams this past week, is the gear from leveling. It wasn't until like if you even had like reasonable gear from like the pre-patch event or something like that, you weren't replacing gear while leveling until like level 76 or onwards, which feels wrong. Like being level 70, doing a quest and getting rewarded with like a 415 or 408 piece of gear, that doesn't seem right at all.
Yeah. My paladin is level 80. He has 503 item level.
Yeah.
um
It it
th-
just I don't
th-
know. I don't know what happened.
so it's weird. I mean, I think it's always been this way where like if you were like geared in close to Abyss, it's going to be a while into the expansion before you start to replace your stuff. I do think it's never felt as extreme as it is now. And also because the leveling is so quick, because you can spam dungeons and get to 80 in like 3 hours, you end up just like not getting a lot of gear at all. Like that's what happened to my paladin is my paladin was the last one I leveled, so I had the 20% bonus from having 4 other leveled things, and I just didn't get a lot of drops in those dungeons, and I just didn't get a lot of gear. I just didn't. And it's like it's a symptom of many different problems overlapping on each other, but like just imagining now taking my 502 paladin and trying to get him heroic ready to get like I think the what's the cutoff is like
Fi
555 or
551.
551.
551. Yeah.
That's 50 item levels I'm gonna have to do, and that's a lot. But yeah, I
The
mean,
other thing is, with the quests too, the main story quests don't seem to award gear. It seems to be all the side quests really that are the ones giving gear. I don't know if you realize that.
I think it's interesting the way that they've designed this now, where I think some of the main quests award gear, but it's always like the way, and they do this with everything now, especially like the local stories, where if you have a quest line basically, right, that's like 5 quests, the first 4 quests will just give you experience and a little bit of gold, and it's not until the final quest in the line that you'll get the reputation, that you'll get the reward. Like it seems like they've developed this thing where it's all just you get one reward at the end of the quest line now. Which I mean, that's a way of doing it. I don't necessarily hate it. I think like psychologically, seeing even from a reputation perspective, like instead of giving 500 at the end of the quest, give 100 per quest in the line. I think that feels better because it feels like
Yeah.
you're making incremental progress. And I think it's the same with gear, that they've kind of decided to just put that on the last one in the quest. It's cool because it like marks to you when you accept that last one. It's like, oh, I'm getting gear on this one. I'm going to be done with this line after this. He's not going to have a new exclamation point that pops up. But yeah, it does kind of make the acquisition of gear kind of stilted a little bit, because
Yeah.
it's not coming till the end of every line that you're doing.
Did you have something else about dungeons that you wanted to say before this? Felt
Mm,
like I cut you off a little bit.
I don't think so.
Okay. I just we were talking about gear and I just immediately jumped into the quests.
No, I
So,
think I'm good.
the other thing that I wanted to say before we really start to wrap up the episode here is I think, and we've talked about this a little bit already, that the speed at which we're leveling and doing the quests, I think is generally good.
Mhm.
I think that getting to max level and getting to unlock your hero talents and all of that stuff is good. Um, Obviously, it comes with the detriment of the story feels a little bit rushed right now. But I think in the future, rather than like having to have this like completed thing that is done once you hit max level, um, trying to draw that out a little bit more and like there's a big event that happens like right at the end of like what is considered the leveling story. um I think that doing that and maybe fleshing out the questing a little bit more is a good idea, but I do feel like it's a little bit rushed right now. I hope that we can keep the speed at which we're leveling, but also maybe try and elongate or explain out more of the story while we're doing it.
Yeah.
um
That's tough to do, right? Because you
yeah.
need you like those two things seem to be almost antithetical to each other.
Hmm.
I will say like because there's so few ultimately quests and stuff like there's not a lot of the filler stuff that we see like sorry Final Fantasy 14, but like there's not a lot of like the main story quests that are just like filler. There is like the occasional like we need to encourage these people, go talk to everyone and tell them it's going to be okay, like that stuff happens, but that is like that is intrinsically connected to the storyline, that like is part of the story we're telling, so like you feel okay with those and they're very quick. I don't know how to solve that particular problem. I will say one thing, it's not entirely related, but if the leveling process is going to be this quick, which it should be, perhaps we need to look into whether or not a 2 week delay between the launch of the expansion and the start of the season still makes sense. Um,
Yep.
because in a world in which, because honestly I went into this weekend expecting to maybe get my main to 80. That was my goal. It was like weekends are usually pretty rough for me playing because I just cannot get into the game at all during the day. It's only really late at night, so a lot of people get more time in this game than I do on the weekends. And I was like, okay, I'll get like 72, 73 by the end of day Friday, and then maybe I can like push into that over the course of the weekend. And then it became so apparent so quickly that no, not only was I going to get 80 on this character, it was going to be like by midday Friday, and then I was going to have a lot of time over the weekend to get an additional 4 characters, which I never expected. So like I'm not saying everyone that plays the game is going to play the game like I did, and just like speed level a lot of characters, but I do feel like even if you take your time with this story and can only play a couple nights a week and can only play for a few hours, I think everyone is going to be done with this story campaign by Tuesday of next week.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that it's something that we definitely need to revisit, and I'm interested to see if we're going to continue to do this as like the first season of a new expansion thing, like Morgan Day initially had said it is going to
Hmm.
be. Um, yeah, I guess we'll see what happens in midnight.
Yeah, we will see. Until then, though, I'm really loving The War Within. It's better than I ever thought it could possibly be. So I'm loving this.
Well, I think the question for the week is, and it's got to be this question: how many tunes have you guys leveled over the course of early access, if you've had it, or even starting yesterday? I mean, hell, you could probably have like 3 tunes leveled by now if you had the day off when the game launched or something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
we had friends that we're not as particularly sweaty as we tend to be that still got to 80 in the first night, because it's just doesn't like, I'm telling you, if you're going at a reasonable clip, not slow but not particularly fast, it's only going to be like 5 hours,
mhm.
um, which is great. I love that.
The other question, and on a more serious note, is what zone has been your guys' favorite while leveling up? And, not even just leveling up, but just exploring throughout the entire zone.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's Hollowfall for Scott and I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon for us.
No, this is
But
actually a trap question, because if you answer anything other than Hollowfall, I'm going to be very suspicious about you.
but that is the question. And let us know why, especially if it isn't Hollowfall. Why do you like something else? Maybe there's something Scott and I are missing. So definitely let us know why.
Hmm.
And do that over at yellingintothevoidwow@gmail.com. YouTube is at yellingintothevoidwow, and Twitter is at into the void wow.
And if you are not already subscribed to this podcast, please do so. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere in the world that accepts RSS feeds. You can find us there. Please subscribe. Make sure you don't miss an episode, and make sure you follow us on YouTube because we are going to continue to try to stream. I didn't get to do any this past weekend, but Tevin really held it down for me. So please make sure you follow us there and catch those streams. We like to hang out and chat with y'all.
And then also please consider liking, subscribing, commenting on YouTube. All of that helps, brings engagement to not only the videos, but the streams and everything else. Let's get, pushed to more people. So
Yeah.
If you like what we do here, please give us a thumbs up and definitely let us know in the comments. So.
I'm going to challenge every single person listening to this right now to, at the very least, write hi in the comments of the YouTube channel. At the very least.
Hi, Scott, or just hi in general?
Just hi. I don't want your hi specific to me. Just a broad, universal hi.
All right. Well, that's the challenge for everybody else. But until then, we'll see you guys next week, and we'll just be over here yelling into the void.
No, yapping into the void.